Patricia Bathory, psychology. What do you know about it? What's the difference between that and other psychologies? She's got great energy, a great story. She's originally from Brazil. She's now, a Canadian a Canadian citizen. And she had an import-export business, was an entrepreneur, was finding trouble in her marriage and with her kids, went to a therapist, changed her life. So she decided to make a complete pivot and go into therapy, into psychology herself. She went and got her degree, and now she works with entrepreneurs and business leaders because she has such insight on that, being one herself. We talk about curiosity, just how curiosity can be so humbling, and perspective in relationships, be it with your partner, be it with business partner, with whomever, how curiosity really is one of the keys, along with perspective, in that kind of success. I also talk about, she has some very great key phrases. I start off with one that she uses a lot that does bring in great perspective. A point of view is always a view from a point. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family, in their passion, in their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. You, Patricia Bathory, thank you so much for your time. Why is a point of view always a view from a point?
Oh man, that's a good starting question. That is actually one of my biggest. I find that if you can figure that out, and if you can do that behavior shift where you realize that every point of view is a view from a point, you then are equipped to understand that you can just see part of the picture. It's like, can you imagine a hockey ref choosing not to use all the different cameras to get the different perspectives of the action? Right? It's like he just has whatever limited view he has from that point of view. So I think that's what it has to do. It's understanding that you do, because of your background or where you come from, your history, you are limited in what you see because you're limited in what you've experienced until today.
And how did you arrive at this?
Oh, I don't even know. I think this is the thing. As a psychotherapist, I end up seeing a lot of clients, and I find that we do have issues in our relationships a lot of times because of this difficulty of seeing things from somebody else's point of view, from putting ourselves, trying to understand what it is that somebody sees from their point of view. So, you start playing with words, you start, every point of view is a view from a point. And one day I was talking to a friend and I said that, and she's like, "That's really good. Let it land." I'm like, okay. So then I started using it on whenever I talk, whenever I do talks and speeches. It's in my book, and it's something I use quite often.
Perspective. It's everything. It's everything, Patricia.
Perspective is everything. If you can, and it is like if you can understand that everything you think, your beliefs, your values, they're a consequence. They're not really, oh no, these are my values, this is my religion, these are my positions. I'm like, well, let's do an exercise here. What if you were born in a completely different country to completely different parents, and you lived a completely different history? Do you seriously, in all honesty, can you tell me you would think the same? You would believe the same? Everything changes. Even the way you see the world, seeing the world as a good place or seeing the world as a nasty place where everybody's out to get you, that has way more to do with your story than with any facts. Right? So this is what that whole perspective thing is huge in my work.
It certainly is, and you bring out the point of blind people touching an elephant in different areas, and discovering they're all right. The person touches the trunk or the person touches the tail, um, but really shifting that perspective. I remember years ago I went to a Thanksgiving, and they made a turkey, but they also made a pot roast, and the roast had the ends cut off, both ends cut off, and I asked why, and they said, well, my grandmother did it that way, so we always do it. So then I did some more investigation, and it took some weeks. Then I asked the grandmother as well. My uncle did that, and come to find out, generations ago they had a really small oven, so in order to fit the roast in, they would cut off the ends. So the perspective back then, well, we needed to do it, and now it's kind of passed on, and you really don't need to do that
Yeah.
anymore.
But see, I love it how you said, you went and researched more, you asked some more questions,
Uh,
which brings me up to something that also, it's something, it's a big, it's a big topic that I use here in therapy too, which is curiosity. So a
mm,
lot of times when you're looking at this roast that's cut on both ends, you don't know why. Instead of judging it, suspend that judgment for a
yeah.
second. Start asking questions, right? Because usually there's a really good rationale for things. There's a rationale for why people think certain way. There's a rationale why people cut. Instead of saying, "Well, that's really stupid. Why do people cut off the both ends of the roast?" It's like, don't judge it. Give it a second, ask
Mm.
questions. You'll come up to answers that are just very elucidating of what is going on.
Yeah, you spend, Patricia, a certain amount of time with curiosity and how it can help relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Curiosity. I think curiosity is, we should always almost trademark it as, the secret to good relationships, the secret to
Mm,
getting along with anybody, the secret to everything. Curiosity is so powerful. It can bridge different generations. It can bridge different cultures. It bridges diversity. It bridges everything because it is at the bottom of lack of judgment and interest and being in this ability of seeing things from different perspectives. It all boils down to like a curious posture,
mm.
right? A curiosity mindset.
Yeah, Patricia, as I get older, I have more questions than I have answers, I find. And I'm just eternally curious. And perhaps one of the main catalysts of why we're talking, why I like to do this right here is just this is the way I learn, just to be curious. And um, it's interesting in relationships how we can just ask our partner or ask our person that in a relationship just simple questions to gain that perspective, because just so many times I just didn't think of that. It's just absolutely amazing. It's like, I do it this way. Why do you do it that way? Oh, that's incredible. That's actually probably a little better. I could see how
Yeah,
just being open to that just makes a world of difference.
yeah. One thing you said there about getting older. The older I get, the less certain I am.
Mm.
And the reason for that, it's a direct consequence of being more curious.
Hmm.
So the more curious you are, obviously the less certain you're going to be because you realize that, you know what, I'm certain because, well, this is how much I know. So I can only be certain about this many things. But
Mm.
if you realize that there's so much more that you don't know, then you become less certain because you realize that, you know what, my certainty is very limited. My certainty is
Mm.
just because there's just so much I know. You were saying about relationships. I do couples counseling pretty often, and one of the things that I work with my couples is trying to understand what it is that the other person's seeing, but by asking these
Mm.
really interesting, curious
Mm.
questions. We're having a conversation. You feel very insulted about something I say.
Mm.
It's trying to get that conversation from the reactive point where you're just upset, and I'm upset that you're upset, and you're defending your point, and I'm defending my point. Taking it from that level and bringing it to the Just hang on a second. Let me try to understand. Let me walk a mile in your
Mm,
shoes
mm,
and understand why is it. And then of course it's like, well, my parents used to fight like this, or
mm.
calling me that, or I have a client who he absolutely hates when people are sarcastic, right? You can be sarcastic to pretty much everybody and they don't really react to it. But with him, it's a thing, it's a trigger. So
Mm,
it's not going to work that way. So the minute the wife understood that, what, you can fight and you can argue and you can disagree and have conflict and all this, the minute you throw in sarcasm in there, it's going to blow up.
that
Well,
breaks.
why is it? Oh, he's just being too reactive. He's just being too sensitive.
Mm,
Is
mm,
it? Let's see if that's what it is. We spent a whole session dissecting why was he so reactive to sarcasm. So we talked about it, talked about it. He
mm.
went back, he understood. The minute he goes in and really says what it was that he saw, what sarcasm did, she was appalled by
Wow.
the times she was sarcastic to him, because
Mm,
she had no clue the effect it had on him.
right.
So it is, again, curiosity is such a superpower if you can have it, if you can reach it.
And you have to have a certain amount of humility to be curious because you're admitting that you don't know something, and that's difficult for some. I remember, I have daughters, they're older now, but when they were younger, we were getting ready to go somewhere, and I would say, girls, 30 minutes we're leaving, and 15 minutes we're leaving. Girls in 5 minutes, I yell up, they're upstairs, and they loved it. They got, yeah. And so I was in a particular relationship and I used this tactic and it did not go over well. There was some trigger, some traumatic episode where that happened. And, we talked about it and it didn't escalate. But again, you just don't know other people's perspective. Something is what I would think is simple as that can be a trigger for someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where the assumptions, right? There's nothing worse for relationships, whether at work, whether in your personal life, than assumptions. Because if you
Mm,
assume, oh no, this is just stupid, oh that's silly, you're overreacting. It's like, well, you know what? It might be overreacting according to where you're from, like where you're coming from. But to them, it's a whole different thing.
hmm,
You touched on intellectual humility. There's tons of studies on how much further people go when they have intellectual humility, right?
mm,
Recognizing that you are privy to just part of what is available out there,
mm,
right? The more you know, and that's the other thing. Intellectual humility is probably 100% correlated to the more you know, the more intellectual humility you have, because the more you
mm.
know, the more you realize you actually don't know.
Right.
So it just opens people up to, like, okay, I don't know this. Somebody starts talking about something that you're not aware of. Instead of going into that conversation to pitch in and say, you know what, I know stuff too.
Mm,
Can you sustain not knowing?
mm,
Right? Can you tolerate sitting there in a position of, you know what, I don't know what you're talking about. And I think I can sit here and it's okay for me if that means that you might think I don't know anything.
mm.
Right. But a lot of people don't tolerate that position. I need to put in my 2 cents to show or to prove that I also know something. Right. So intellectual humility, it comes into play in that. But it is after doing the work. You got to do the work for a long time to get to that position where you're very, very comfortable in just sitting in silence and listening and taking it in. And you actually are the one who gets the most out of it if you can just
Mm.
stay silent.
You certainly are, and it goes to listening as well. Many people don't listen; they just wait to talk.
Yeah. Listening is very different than waiting for your turn to talk. That's gold. That is gold. It is very different. And listen, if you rearrange the letters, it spells silent,
Huh?
right? To really listen, you need to be silent. You need to tolerate that, it's okay. I don't need to show up in this conversation. I can sit here and really listen to what you have to contribute. And if you can do that, it is better for you. I have a pillar in when I do talks for companies and stuff, and one of the pillars for us to improve connections and for us to go further in our relationships is the pillar of listening to learn. right? And
Mm,
listening to learn is different than listening to respond or listening to solve, right? Sometimes you just got to understand, what is it that the other person's saying. When you're listening, your only goal is to understand, is to
mm,
learn, not solve a problem, not react, not respond, just listen. And that is so easy to say, but so difficult to do. I want to share something. I do the work, I work with this. I tell clients this week in, week out, week in, week out. And I just came from a boot camp for speaking, and it was great. Just these phenomenal people. And I was sitting with some people, and there was this guy who was saying these really interesting things about psychology. And he had his stuff together, and he was saying and contributing and sharing and saying things that were really smart. And for a moment there, I kind of wanted to say something to contribute, right? And then I'm having this internal conversation going, what's the purpose of what you have to say? Why
mm,
is it that you need to say something? Is it to get external validation that you too are smart?
mm,
Is it because I was admiring what he was saying? I was going, yeah, he's really smart. Maybe if I say something, I'll be smart by adjacency.
mm, mm,
And I'm
mm,
like, why is it? Because he's doing such a good job. Why is it that I need to get into this conversation? So I had this whole conversation in my head, and I'm like, you know what? No, he's doing a really good job. Let him shine. Let him be. So it is like it's this constant being in check. Do I need to say anything? Do I need to go in? Or can I just sit silent here and actually can I be silent? Can I be intellectually humble and take it in
mm,
instead of having to show off how smart I am? It's almost an insecurity thing. We always need to
mm, mm.
validate ourselves. Like, I know stuff too. Hey, listen to me. I'm smart too. So it's letting go of that need.
Yeah, and I find, Patricia, that the more questions I ask and listen, the more questions I have. I mean, it just keeps going.
Because once you start digging, right, you realize that the more you start digging, the more you realize how much you don't know.
Yeah,
And I think that's what it comes down to. Start digging, then you're like, there's a world of stuff I don't know.
yeah, so much, so much. You
Absolutely.
mentioned you're a psychotherapist. What's the difference between a psychotherapist and other therapists?
That's a good question. And I think, I don't know, I'm going to give you a limited answer because I'll give you the limited answer. I'm in Canada. So in Canada, the education is the same. We all need a master's in counseling psychology. So I have a master's in counseling psychology. Psychologists have a master's in counseling psychology. The difference is the body, the regulating body that regulates us.
Huh.
So for a for a psychologist, for a registered psychologist, they once they graduate, they need to do a certain number of hours under the supervision of a psychologist.
I see.
They're also regulated by, so in Alberta, the province I'm in, a psychologist can only work in this province.
Hmm.
Now, I'm a psychotherapist. I'm regulated by the CCPA, the Canadian, what are they called? The Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapy Association. So I'm regulated by them. I can work across the country, but I have the same education as a psychologist. So it's a little bit of semantics. I don't know how it is in the US. I don't know how it is in other countries, but for Canada, that's in a nutshell what it is.
Hmm. And the difference between a therapist and a coach?
Again, you're asking me questions that I'm not really very certain about. I know that a therapist, like a psychotherapist and a counseling psychologist, you will need a master's degree. So
Mm.
in Canada, that's 2 years of education plus 8 months doing an internship. It's a long process. A coach, it depends on where you get your coaching degree, where you get that coaching education. Some are longer, some are shorter. I think it's just different. But you know, there's a little bit of maybe I'm not the best person to be giving you
Mhm.
an answer. I'll just be curious. I'm like, I don't know.
I was always told that a therapist kind of can go back and a coach goes forward. Not that they both can't do that, but they try to help in those ways, kind of a
You know
roundabout
what?
way.
That is a distinction that a lot of people make. So I don't want to go into the generalizing
Mm.
definitions. There is something to what you say. I will not disagree. But that being said, in psychology, there is an approach called solution focused therapy, which is 100% in the future. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I work. I work with leaders. What I do is I help leaders succeed by improving their connection to their most important relationships, to their teams at work, to the people that they work for and who work for them. So that is my specialty, working with leaders because I have a background in business. I'm an entrepreneur. I have an import export business out of Brazil for 20 years. I have a master's in business. So that is my original career, I guess, that the first thing I did. And then I went into psychology. So when I work with leaders, the first thing we do is what's going on. We do the present. Tell me what's going on. Well, I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with that. Trying to understand the problem a little bit. Now, I have a psychoanalytical background. So naturally, I'll try to go back in the sense
Mm.
of remember how we talked about who you are today is a consequence of everything you've lived up to now,
Hmm.
right? So, as much as focusing in the future is gold, sometimes if you don't understand what's at the core of the problem, it's hard to make that switch. So usually when I work with my leaders, what we'll do is we'll talk about the present for a couple of sessions and then we'll go into the past. Why is it that you always have issues with your teams? Why is it that you find that you talk, but they're not listening to you? Why is it that you think that your leadership style has to do? And this is one of my clients. He came to realize that his leadership style was directly connected to his past trauma.
Hmm.
So it is like it's deep inside. So we go and do some of that past work. How was it with your family of origin? What is the relationship your parents had? It serves as a reference for you in every single relationship you have in the future as an adult.
Hmm.
The family you build is an answer to some of the issues you had in your family of origin. So going to the past is interesting. It is a Freud even said it. It's a journey. You get on a train, you look out the window, and you tell the therapist what it is that you're seeing out this window. But you're on a train. You're not sitting there. You're on a train. This is what's going on. This is what I see. This is what we're going through. You're not going to sit there. We're not going to stay there. But we need to know what it is that you see out that window so that we can bring it to the present and kind of then put it into perspective.
Hmm.
Right? So, okay, here we got the perspective for the present. Oh, these things might be connected. That might be connected. Now, once we're in the present, equipped with all this knowledge and all these keys we need to turn, now, my friend, it's all about the future.
Hmm.
We don't dwell on the past. And so then it's about how do we do this? How do we move forward? Now that we know what we know, how can we move forward?
Hmm.
Now that I know these are my triggers, how can I move forward? And that is, I think, where the gold is. The ability to look into the past, see what about the past shaped the way I think, and then move forward with that awareness so that that does not hold you back.
Hmm. As a former entrepreneur, you mentioned your Brazilian import export business. Is this why you work with leaders, business leaders now? You kind of have an insight?
I think so. I think so. Um, I know as an entrepreneur, I know the challenges of running a business,
Mm.
both from the I'm a leader, I need to run this, like regardless of what issues I have in my personal life. So I know that. But I also, as a leader, I know that when you have crippling issues in your personal life, show must go on over here, right? You still have to show up for your teams. You got to have sales. You need to be profitable, regardless of how things are not working well at home. So I think understanding those two, I find that I do have a little bit of an edge for that population specifically. And that's the thing, as a psychologist and as a coach, there's many different, the one thing that predicts the success of therapy is the relationship between
Hmm.
therapist and client. The number one predictor. So it is about having that rapport. It is about being seen, being heard, being understood. So I find that with the population of executives and leaders, there is that rapport. She knows what I'm talking about. So when you talk about promotions, when you talk about boards, when you talk about statements, I know what that's like. But then there's other areas that I don't shine at all. Like supportive therapy is one where, oh my God, I'm not good at it. I'm not, I sometimes push, I keep that focus on what can we do about it. And sometimes supportive therapy is about how do we stay where we are and not get worse. That kind of those clients I have more difficulty with, and it's
Mm.
immediate. It's very interesting because right in the, as we're doing our first interviews and understanding, like, is this going to work out? Because I have a 30-minute interview before we start our work together. And I know when I'm not the person, I know when I'm not the
Mm.
match. And I have lots of really good friends who work really well. And then I just recommend and I refer them out.
You talk about, Patricia, how I believe you started dating your husband like when you were 19, and you were together, and you have kids. Things were going well, but it came to a certain point where you kind of felt a little dead end, and there was some, some disruption, some kind of disharmony. And you did meet somebody, work with them for about a year, and they saved your life. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, it wasn't a year. I think I still see her today, and it's
Ah,
yeah, she's very important in my life. Her name's Cecilia. I met her right when we started struggling. Long relationship. So this year is our 30 being together, serene.
wow.
So it's a long time. It's a long 30 years. I mean, I'm not that old. So it's
Mm,
a long time. We met, we were really young. And, there's always a moment or two that you struggle. Anybody who's been together for, I'd say, if you've been together for over 10 years, there's going to be a moment that things just get to a point where they're not really that smooth. And
mm,
I always recommend go find help sooner than later.
mm,
Because if you go too late, then sometimes there's a lot more to overcome. More hurtful things were said, more hurtful things
mm,
were done. With us, we're just not communicating well. Things are not doing well, and then we actually went to see a therapist together. It was all about communication, and I always make a joke about this when I tell people. I'm like, you know what? I went to the therapist. It's all about my defective husband, my problematic children. Of course, it's not me. I'm doing so
mm.
well. I'm
Of
so great,
course.
and of course, it's not. Right?
No.
It is about bringing it to the awareness of what am I contributing to the current conundrum I'm in,
Mm,
right? So it is about you did this, you did that. I hate it when you're not attentive, when you're not doing this, and when you, and it's what about me? What about when I don't show up fully? What about when I'm multitasking when we're talking? What about when I'm not listening in silence?
mm,
Right? So it is about rearranging all that. So I think doing the work, and I think that's part of the reason I shifted into the psychotherapy, into becoming a psychotherapist. It's about making a difference in somebody else's life. Like
mm,
when I say save my life, of course, it's not save my life, but I cannot imagine today, if you ask me, what is my most valuable, um, what is it that I have today in my life that is of most value? And I will tell you, it's my family.
mm,
It's the family that I've built with my husband. It's the relationship that we have 30 years later. I still think he's a great guy. He is my buddy. He's my friend. He's the one I want to tell stuff to because, like, the inside jokes and all this stuff. And we raised two really awesome human beings together through our struggles, through moving different countries and different families and different dynamics. And we've managed to overcome this all. So, when I say she saved my life, I guess that's what I'm referring to is the fact that if you take my family away from me today, I'm like, I don't know how much I have. Like,
mm,
what is
mm,
it that I have today that I value as much as that? So I always recommend that people, if you're struggling, a therapist is great because they'll help you with that piece of perspective.
mm,
Right? They'll tell you, it's like, you know what? Maybe you're not that great. What is it that you're doing to contribute to this? You're 50% of that relationship, my friend. So don't go thinking it's about the husband, the partner, the kids, maybe there's some of you in there too.
So was it this experience, Patricia, that made you pivot into psychotherapy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Being I love my work as an entrepreneur. I love my work. Import export. I love my clients. I still run my business, and it's over 20 years. It's solid. It does really well. It's a reoccurring sale. It's great.
Nice.
People are nice, everything. But the one piece I was always lacking was it was positively impacting other people's lives. So I sell food products. They're great quality. I see these great people. But at the end of the day, if my company goes extinct, then you will buy a different brand of juice. You'll buy a different brand of product. And I
Mm.
haven't really impacted you. I'll die. And it's like, what has she left? Nothing. So I always wanted that. And when I saw my therapist, I'm like, man, like a psychotherapist is able to absolutely change the life of a family,
Hmm.
right? And if you think about it, if we have healthier families are the building blocks of society. So if we just take that lens out, and if you can help organize the structure of families and they're more functional and they're working better, you contribute to better communities, better cities, better societies, and ultimately a better world.
Mm.
So to me, that was that was really, really the minute I realized that, I'm like, you know what, maybe I want some of that. And literally 4 years after I walked into the therapist office, I became one myself. Went
Wow.
back to school, did all my training, did all my hours, and I'm like, I can do this. And I've been loving it since.
Hmm. You also talk a lot, Patricia, about just mental health and entrepreneurship and leadership, how there needs to be a stronger attention and direction in that area.
Absolutely. Um, you know, in today's workplace, right? You have disruption, you got post-COVID, everybody is different. You got Gen Z. This year's the year where they're more in the workforce than the boomers. So there's a
Mm.
lot happening over there. And the new generation coming in, plus the generation that's already there's a shift in mentality where, unless you're connected to your leaders, unless you're connected to your company, unless you're connected to their purpose, you're not really going to give all your effort and engagement. So the mental health piece comes in as, how can we have a connected leadership? How can we be more human? How can we understand the needs of people, do the adjusting, do the adapting? So that is a piece that back then, I don't know, like 20 years ago, management was very different. It was like top bottom. Now it is shifting. And I
Hmm.
think that is something that we really need to be aware of in order for companies to succeed.
We talked about hard to listen sometimes, but it is hard for some leaders to ask for this kind of help, right? They may see it as a point of weakness or something. How do we get over that?
That is the $1 million question.
Yeah.
I have a lot of empathy, a lot of understanding, because what you just described, I have a few clients that are exactly where you are.
Hmm.
I actually heard this last week from a client. No, I don't want to talk about that because it makes me go into all that feeling area.
Ha.
The fear is real, right? Sometimes I get questions regarding, how confidential is this? Will somebody, because they're not worried about the
Hmm.
confidentiality of the conversation. They're worried about the confidentiality of, will people know I come and see you?
Mm, mm.
Right? They don't even want me to text. They don't want me to email. Some people, and I'll tell you how difficult it is to overcome these beliefs. I have clients that pay me out of pocket that they do not submit their claims to insurance
Wow.
because they don't want insurance to know they go to therapy. Right? So if you look at this, it's a huge shift. As a therapist, I have no judgment to that. What I do is, let's go back. Where do those core beliefs come from?
Hmm.
Why is it that you think that being here, talking about your child and your wife and how much your love for them hurts?
Mm.
how much your love for them is the most valuable thing you have in your life. Why is that so uncomfortable? Right? They can talk about the multi-billion dollars they closed. They can talk about buying people and firing people and, merging and mergers and acquisitions and multi-billion dollars, like the ease with which they use all these big words. But get them to talk about how much they love their wife and how
Mm.
meaningful she was for them overcoming alcoholism or workaholism, or
Hmm.
they were the ones who made them have the life they have today, how much they were supportive in the beginning of their career, or how much they love their children. You would be surprised like how difficult it is for some of these people to have these conversations. So mental health is a thing. Breaking down the stigma
Mm.
related to
Mm.
talking about our feelings is a thing. We still have to grow. But again, I do the little, one step at a time every day. I'm like, if it becomes a little more comfortable every day, and I usually, that's what I do with these clients specifically. I'm like, do you remember when you wouldn't even agree with me that the love that you have for your child was painfully good?
Mm.
Right? Because in the beginning, they didn't even know that, they didn't even understand what that concept meant. And I love it when they say, oh, I never thought about it that way. I never thought about it that way. And I love it when they have these insights of, you know what, it hurts. Baby, it hurts so good, right? Like the song says. I'm like, that's what the song is about.
Mm. Patricia, has technology played a part in growing in helping with psychotherapy in your practice and just in general?
Yes. I 100% of the clients I see today, they're online.
Mm.
100%. Had an office until COVID, and there was this big thing. So my first training is a psychoanalyst. So as a psychoanalyst, there was this huge thing that the setting was important, that therapy could never be done online. Well, sure enough, COVID hit and everybody learned to do
Hmm.
therapy online. It was overnight.
Right.
We, I remember last day I was in the office was a Tuesday morning just to get my files, go back home, go back home, go back home the following Monday. So not even a week. The following Monday, I'm like, all right, people, we're going to make this work online. Let's see how it
Wow.
works. So it was a quick turnaround. So seeing people online, it has revolutionized therapy, because one thing about therapy is the therapist's office, there's this, and like there's the waiting room. So for people who were resistant to going to therapy because of the waiting room, that was always an issue. Right. And I know I have some friends who are therapists that they have the in door and the out
Ah.
door. Right? But my office, the indoor was the same one as the outdoor. So as you were coming in, you see whoever's going out, and as
Mm.
you're coming out. So just that was something that people are like, no, I'm not gonna go to
Wow.
therapy. What if somebody sees me going to therapy?
Wow.
So
Wow.
now it's like you do it in the privacy of your home. Nobody sees you going in and out, which I again, this doesn't do much for breaking down the barrier of the stigma, but at least it gets people to go to therapy.
Mm.
So I'm like, it's a half win, but it's still a win.
Mm.
I'll take it as a win because a half win is still better than no win.
Is it more efficient to do it in person over video? Do you lose something over video?
So there's many types of therapy now. So people do in person still, they'll do it video, they can do it on the phone, and they do it texting.
Huh.
So I will speak for myself, Patricia, and I speak for myself only,
Right.
right? In person therapy works really well for me. Video works really well for me. I don't lose anything. I see you. I see your reaction. I actually had a client going, won't you lose my micro expressions? I'm like, no, I'm pretty good at this. Like
Mm.
it's
Mm.
pretty good definition. My screen's pretty big. I know what you're saying. I capture it. It's all good. If I've seen you for a couple of years, like actually I had a client last week is like, I'm in the middle of somewhere. Can I just park and can we do our sessions on the phone? I'll do that. If I've been seeing you for a while, I can do a session phone only,
Hmm.
but only if you've been a client for a while.
I see.
I can tell you, I do have difficulties where, first session, second session, third session, it's like, let's do it on just by a phone call. I don't do that well. I know that's
Mm.
not that's where my strength is. It's not the voice. I'm more of a visual person. So I really need to see if what I'm saying is landing, to see if you have question marks, for me to really analyze what your reaction is. I need that video. But so just doing it on the phone doesn't work for me very well. And texting for sure doesn't. I don't
Hmm.
text my friends. Like honestly, if I text you, you text me back, you're texting me again, I'm calling.
Hmm.
Like I'm just not a texter. Like I'm not a texter at all. So, but I know that the younger kids, they do it well. There's younger therapists who see um, younger generation and they do the texting therapy and they find that it's very helpful.
Wow.
I'm not here to judge. Again, I just speak from my experience. I'm not a texter. I cannot do therapy texting. I don't even know what you mean when you're texting me. I don't know what those
Yeah.
things mean. Like I have no intonation. So that's my very long-winded question to to your answer.
What questions should somebody ask when somebody's seeing a therapist if they should stay with them? How do they
Can,
know?
can you repeat that question?
What questions should someone ask when they're seeing a therapist in order for them to stay? What should they be seeing immediate progress? How do they know that it's working? What should a person do? What kind of inventory should they take?
To see if therapy is working?
Yes, or is it therapy itself, or is it the therapist? Maybe the therapist doesn't work for them for some reason.
Absolutely. So that is so there's two answers to that. Regarding the therapist is like what I said before. The number one predictor of successful therapy is a good relationship between client and therapist,
Mm,
right? So you have a good rapport. If there's that chemistry happening, if you think that I got you, yeah, she gets me. She knows what I'm saying. Yes, she absolutely nails it. She is empathic. She understands my pain. That is going to work.
hmm,
If you go to your therapist and it's not, you have a feeling. You're like, I don't know if the therapist, like, I don't know if they don't get me. They're kind of mean to me, or they're asking me, or they're pushing me places where I don't want to go. The therapist, again, that relationship has to be very respectful and it has to be very well oiled for it to go forward. So that is regarding the therapist. Regarding, and I don't know if that's what you asked, but
yeah.
if the question is, what are the indicators of successful therapy?
Mm.
And I don't know if that's what you're asking.
Better way to ask that question.
Is
Yes.
that what the question
Yeah.
was? So
Yes.
what how do you know if your therapy is working? Is that the question?
Yes. How do you know?
How do you know? So I worked at a place that was evidence-based. So we made people fill out a
Survey?
questionnaire every
Yeah.
time they came in. Every single time they had to fill a questionnaire. So we had the dots for improvement. I don't use that method. So when I left that company, that center, and I went into my private practice, I abolished the evidence based because it is me. I run my own business. I kind of know how to gauge if it's working or not. How do I know? Usually every 3 to 5 sessions, maybe 5 sessions, every 5 sessions, I'll sit and I'll ask, what are we doing here?
Mm,
What is your goal for therapy? Do you find that we are moving forward?
mm,
The thing with successful therapy is that it is not dependent on the therapist, right? So that gets me off the hook,
mm,
which is not what I'm doing here, but it does because it's like piano lessons, right? I can be the best piano teacher. I can be a great pianist. I can have the best teaching skill and all this, but you come in here for an hour and I'll teach you all the different keys in a song and all this. If you don't do the work between today and our next session, you're still going to be at the same spot,
mm.
right? If I send you home with a question to think about and to ponder, and you don't, then of course you're not going to go anywhere.
Wow.
5 sessions in, you're still sitting going, well, why is it I'm so anxious? Why is it? I'm like, well, are you thinking about the things we talked about?
Hmm.
Right? Are you giving yourself the
Hmm.
gift of reflection? And I find that therapy, you can only go to therapy when you have enough time in your schedule to give yourself the gift of reflection daily. Whether you're meditating, whether you are writing down the thoughts, Or even if it's just while you're having a shower, thinking about the conversations we're having.
Hmm.
You're sitting there going, okay, I'm supposed to analyze what part can I possibly be contributing to my problems? What is it that I possibly can be doing? Right? Take it seriously. Put some effort in. If you put in the work, it will work.
Hmm.
But I'm no magician and I'm not a one-man show.
I play a lot of one of my passions is golf, Patricia, and I find this with instructors as well. I hear some people, well, I've been with them for 3 or 4 months and I'm not feeling, I don't feel any better. I said, well, are you practicing what they're saying? I mean, it really, you know, uh, you're a conduit there, but the real work's got to be done with the client.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy too, because as a golfer, I hear you. If you're not
Yeah.
there doing the work, putting in the hours, you're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, it's too often we fall into our old habits, even in golf, right? Where I know I can get this shot off this way, but I'm not going to be a better golfer because I'm falling into those old habits. I have to, take these tips and take these practices that my instructor sees that I don't. It's be the same thing in practice. So, Patricia, I started my business back in the '90s. I was working way too hard. I know you're not unfamiliar with that, and putting my nutrition behind, I got myself up to 340 pounds, poor diet, drinking soda at night, etc. Doctor said to me, if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. My daughter was just born. So I took the next 6, 7 months, lost about 130 pounds. People always ask me how. And I always say discipline. There's no secret. There's no secret. Just discipline, focus, discipline. That's how I got. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, Patricia.
Discipline plays a huge role in my life. And congratulations on the turning around.
Mm,
And that's, you know what, if I'm just gonna go back a second here into what we were talking about, you went to a nutritionist, you went to the doctor, and they
mm,
said you need to lose the weight.
that's right.
If you come back the following week and you're still weighing the 340 pounds and you're like, you know what, my nutritionist is really bad.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that is. It's like blaming
Right.
the nutritionist
Right.
for you not losing the weight. You are the one who needs to do the work. So congratulations on doing the work.
Yeah.
It's the work of reprogramming your mind and your habits. That is discipline,
Hmm.
right? One thing I talk about is discipline is necessary, because when people talk about, well, you need to be motivated, absolutely, I agree. You need to be motivated to change. You need to be motivated for um, to lose weight. You need to be motivated to exercise. I agree. But motivation fails,
Hmm.
right? Like, I can tell you 98% of the times that I go to the gym, and I'm not even exaggerating here, this is not a hyperbole, it's 98% or 99, I'm not motivated to go to the gym.
Mm.
I'm disciplined. It's sheer discipline,
Hmm.
because discipline is doing now what needs to be done, right? It's not what you want to do, but what needs to be done
Mm.
is focusing on the outcome, not on the immediate pleasure of, just having another soda and just chilling for another day or working a
Mm.
little bit more. So there's a moment that it is sheer discipline, and it's necessary for mental health. Like, you wouldn't think, right? It's like discipline is important for mental health. If you want to get better, if you don't have the discipline, and this is very unfortunate, but some of my clients, I'll tell you a specific story of a client that it's a beautiful story. He comes in to see me, has issues with he's getting divorced, issues with the kids. There's something about the parenting that is not quite there. There's a connection he doesn't feel with his kids, and not just a connection, but because he doesn't feel connected to his kids, there's this almost a disengagement of his paternal responsibilities.
Hmm.
Right. So I'm not engaged. They don't really like me. They don't really get along with me. So it's okay not to be there.
Hmm.
So he comes to see me, and, as a responsible therapist, I'm like, well, it's not about you at this point. It's
Mm.
about the children. So
Mm.
I start pushing, and, and this is where, I'm not very good in supportive therapy. If you're going to come here for us to just be okay with your situation, if you're not going to move forward, I'm definitely not the therapist for you. So
Interesting.
he comes in to see me, and I think we did the work for about 2, 3 months. I know he didn't like me. because I knew the rapport wasn't there because I wasn't saying what he wanted to hear,
Mm.
right? I always found a way to say, you are the adult and you are the parent and you are the one responsible for making connection happen. These are
Hmm.
children, is not up to them. Oh, because they are not this or they don't think I'm fun. Well, you make yourself fun. These are kids. You got to reinvent yourself. So I know that 3 months later, he stops showing up. I'm like, all right, fair enough. You're not ready for it, right? So, not ready or not engaged, or maybe I'm not the right therapist. He disappears. The man is gone for probably a year. It wasn't a full year, but probably 8, 9 months. He comes back. First session back, I'm like, oh, good to see you and stuff. I never usually ask why you're gone because it's not about my relationship with the client. It's about his path. So
Hmm.
he comes in immediately. He starts with, you know how you said last time that I was responsible for making the relationship with my kids work? I'm here to work on that.
Hmm.
It takes people time
Right.
to get to the point where they're ready to change. I'm sure when you were 340 pounds, you weren't there for a day.
Hmm.
You sat there for a while.
Hmm.
One day something clicks, and then you're like, I got to do something about it. And then the minute you decide, then my friend, it becomes all about discipline. And this client has been working so hard on, finding skills and doing things. And just, he is the hardest working man, and it's sheer discipline.
Hmm.
Because his kids, for at least the first few months, still did not like him, still did not want to be with him. One of the kids that used to go to his house and cry and want to go back home to mother, and it was horrible.
Wow.
She cried, and then he'd go to his room and he would cry because he was so sad. But now the kids go, the kids stay, they love his company. So discipline gets you where you want to go. So
Hmm.
it's a huge thing for me too.
And you're originally from Brazil, right? You
Yes.
had this family. You came uh, um, to Canada, and you had the import. I mean, given that, given that, cross kind of definitely different cultures, and I wonder how discipline played a role when you were a child versus an adult. Now, has it changed much?
I So discipline is my middle name.
Huh?
I'm recovering discipline addict.
Are you
So I'm like on the other extreme. And this is with everything, right? Like we kind of need to have a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that.
balance?
Every client that comes across, I'm very disciplined. I'm
Hmm.
extremely disciplined. So what I found that I'm actually working on is being a little less,
Ha!
a little more, just relax, just be more flowy, just be more, because it has and I attribute all the success I've had, whether in business, whether even in relationships. I mean, think about, my relationship with my husband. To be together 30 years, it requires a lot of discipline
It sure does.
of, this is important to him. I will do what's important to him. I will do what is important for our relationship, not what I want to do right now. Because a lot of times you just want to do what you want to do, right? Like, no, I don't want to go to this engagement. I don't want to go to that party. I don't want to, right? Like, I don't want to close my computer at 8 and, go and hang out and have dinner and do this. And the same applies to him. How many times I do these little bids for love? I'm like, hey, can we do this? And he'll go for a walk with me and he'll come for a run with me and he'll do this and he'll do that, just to please, to invest in that relationship, to make that strong. So discipline is important for relationships that for the relationships that you build, for businesses that you build. It's very, very important. But I will make a footnote that discipline is all, like everything. Too much of anything is also not ideal. There is a range there that we need to work in, and too much discipline breaks up the flow. So
Mm.
I'm married to somebody who's all about the fun and the flow. So it's a great, like, he has been so good and, like, making me less uptight and less, just relax. We had a, this is a great story. We went to Egypt and we're on a cruise and all this. And I'm telling him, so tomorrow we can go to this event and then we can go visit that. And then, you know what, to be more efficient, we can then have lunch and then in the afternoon see that. He looks at me and he's like, why is it that we need to be efficient? We're on vacation. So I'm like, oh my God, this is so eye-opening. So that is me. So you're talking to a recovering discipline addict, but it's yeah.
Hmm. Patricia Bathory, what motivates you?
Oh, I feel like I've been talking so much. I almost want to turn this question around. This is so different than my sessions. Usually, like I'm the one asking the questions. I'm like, oh, um, what motivates me? I actually have a post-it right by my desk here, and it has the two things I want to be able to say when I die. And one says, I purposefully tried to be better every day.
Mm,
And that is one of the things that motivates me. I don't want to be complacent. I
mm,
want to be better. And by being better, right, because that's very open ended, better to me means being a more generous human being, a kinder human being, contributing to humanity, contributing to other people, giving. And the other one is had a great life, knew it, and was very grateful for it.
mm,
So I don't want to be an entitled person. I have been privileged all my life, incredibly lucky with everything.
mm,
Great children, a great partner, fabulous parents, wonderful siblings. Everybody that passes through my life, everybody is good. You know, it is. I always am like, man, in the accounting for karma, I'm so in debt.
mm,
So that the weight of this debt of having had so many good things happen to me, I feel that I need to, pay back the world and pay it forward. So that is the second thing that motivates me.
mm. So, given that, Patricia, how do you measure success?
Success is when the gap between where I want to be and where I am becomes very small.
Hmm.
So I guess it all has to do with having a clear vision of this person I want to be.
Right. You have that defined.
I have that defined. Am I there yet? That's a whole different question. No,
Mm,
I fail at it daily,
mm,
but I do take account. I
mm,
do go over, I'm going to share something with you that I'm very ashamed. I'm not going to say what I said because I'm very ashamed. I haven't gotten over the shame, but I drove to BC. We live in Alberta. We drove to Whistler. We spent 2 weeks there skiing. So we're driving, and 6 hours into the driving, I'm not my best self. I'm tired already. And we stopped at this place to get some sandwiches. And the guy at the fast food restaurant, it's a little joint. The guy asks me a question, and I answered him with a tone. I know exactly what I said, and I'm not telling you again because I'm ashamed. I'm like, who says that after all these conversations, all this, I want to be better,
enlightened.
I want to be
Yeah.
purposeful. I said something that I will not repeat.
Mm,
And then I'm like, what is happening here? Like,
mm,
why? Like, how does that even come out of my mouth? Right. So that day, as I got in the car, so it doesn't even take me long. Immediately, I'm like, that is so not who I want to be. Right. And of course, there's a little bit of self flagellation like, this is not where you want to be. You are so clear of where you want to be, how you want to behave, what kind of person you want to be, where this destination is. And here you failed. But I take account of my failures because I find that that's how I can go, okay, I'm still failing at this point. I still got to work on this. And then I keep moving forward that way.
mm. Thank you for sharing that. It's not easy for people to do that. And I love that you have that defined. And I never quite heard it described as success like that. That's wonderful. Patricia, such a pleasure speaking to you. I'm so glad we set this up, and I've been excited to talk to you. I love your insight and what you do. Anybody listening, how can they get in touch with you?
You can get in touch through LinkedIn. So it is Patricia Bathory. I also have my new site is coming up with my book release on April 16th. So that's patriciabathory.com. and get in touch with me. I'll connect. Ask me questions if you have any questions about anything, and I'm here for you.
Bathory, Bathory, just like it
Correct.
sounds. We'll make sure we put it in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time. Next time I'm up in your neck of the woods, perhaps you, your husband, and I will get a cup of tea.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure to participate. Thank you for having me as a guest. It's been an honor to serve, and I hope people get something good out of this interview.
You be well.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations.